Hi, everyone. This is Global Podcast, your window to the world. Breaking news, big ideas, your global hangout for what's happening now, and bold conversations. Wherever you are, we're bringing it to you. Let's get started.
Keeping up with everything that's happening in the world, it could really feel kind of overwhelming sometimes, like trying to drink from a fire hose.
It definitely is a lot to process.
Yeah, I mean, you want to stay informed, you want to know what's going on, but gosh, where do you even start?
It's so easy to get bogged down in just an endless stream of headlines and articles.
Exactly. And so much of it is just noise, right? Clickbait and stuff.
Definitely. Finding those truly significant developments and understanding what they actually mean, well, that takes time and focus.
And who has the time for all that?
Exactly.
Well, that's kind of the whole point of this deep dive, right? We're giving you a clear, concise snapshot of the most important global news breaking this morning, March 27th, 2025. We've pulled from all sorts of sources. You've got the usual suspects, Reuters, Al Jazeera, CNN, giving us that global perspective. But we've also dug into X, seeing what people are talking about on the ground, and tapped into regional outlets like Z News in India, news scrolling out of Nigeria, and Odisha TV over in, Odisha.
That's right. We've really cast a wide net to get a well-rounded picture of what's happening.
Exactly. And the goal here is simple. We're extracting the essential stuff, those key developments, and giving you a sense of why they matter, all without overloading you.
It's about cutting through the clutter and giving you the information you need to understand what's shaping the world right now.
Okay, let's jump right in, shall we? And one of the most, frankly, surprising things we came across is this news about a possible truce between Ukraine and Russia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, specifically in the Black Sea. And it also seems to involve energy stuff. Now, Reuters first reported on this a couple days ago, on the 25th, and they mentioned that any enforcement, like making sure both sides stick to it, would really hinge on Washington's involvement.
Interesting. So the U.S. would be key to making this work.
That's what they're saying. And then we also saw some posts on X suggesting that these ceasefire talks happening over in Saudi Arabia, they might be gaining some momentum.
Huh. Okay, so there's movement on multiple fronts.
It seems like it. Reports indicate that both Ukraine and Russia actually stopped, or at least paused, their military actions in the Black Sea area as of, again, the 25th. Yeah. Pretty unexpected, isn't it? Given everything else that's going on between them.
It is surprising, yeah. I mean, the conflict seems so entrenched. Why do you think they'd agree to something like this now?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe it's a way to, ease tensions, maybe create some breathing room for those broader negotiations.
That's possible. But the reliance on Washington for enforcement, that's something to pay attention to. It suggests maybe a lack of trust between Ukraine and Russia, They need a third party to make sure everyone keeps their word.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And that could have long-term implications, right? If any lasting peace in that region depends on outside powers stepping in.
Definitely. And the fact that this is happening alongside those reported talks in Saudi Arabia, well, it paints a picture of a lot of diplomatic activity behind the scenes. Of course, it's way too early to say if this truce will hold or how broad its impact might be.
Right, it's a wait-and-see situation for sure. Now, shifting gears completely, but sticking with big international developments, there's some troubling news out of Gaza. Al Jazeera is reporting that a Hamas spokesman, a guy named Abdel Latif al-Qanoua, has been killed.
Oh, wow. How did that happen?
Apparently, it was an airstrike that hit his tent in Jabalia al-Balad, which is in northern Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
This happened yesterday. The news broke around 7 p.m. Pacific time.
So fairly recently.
Yeah, just yesterday. And what makes this even more concerning is that it follows reports of a real uptick in Israeli airstrikes earlier this week. Over 65 deaths reported. This feels like a major escalation, doesn't it?
It does. Taking out a high-profile figure like a Hamas spokesman, it's not just about military targets. It's about sending a message, disrupting communication, maybe even trying to weaken the organization from the inside.
Yeah, I can see that. And when you factor in those intensified airstrikes, well, it raises some serious questions. Is this a shift in strategy from Israel? Could this be the beginning of an even bigger conflict in Gaza?
It's a possibility, and a very worrying one, especially for the people living there. We've got to remember the humanitarian situation in Gaza is already dire, and any escalation in violence is only going to make things worse.
Absolutely. Okay, let's hop over to the U.S. now, where there's some potentially huge economic news brewing. CNN reported yesterday that former President Trump has announced, get this, a 25% tariff on all cars shipped into the country.
Whoa, 25%? That's a big jump.
It is, and it's set to take effect pretty quickly on April 2nd. This feels like a major play, something that could really shake up the global trade landscape.
It definitely has the potential to do that. I mean, we're not just talking about cars here, right? This could have ripple effects across all sorts of industries, impacting relationships with other countries, too.
Absolutely. The stated goal is to boost American manufacturing and address what they call trade imbalances, which basically means situations where a country is importing way more than it's exporting. But as we know, these things can be tricky.
Exactly. And historically, tariffs like this, they've sometimes led to higher prices for consumers, retaliatory tariffs from other countries, and companies scrambling to adjust their supply chains. It can be a messy business.
It can be, yeah. And what's really striking here is just how fast they're trying to implement this. April 2nd is right around the corner, so if this goes through, we could see a very rapid shift in the economic landscape.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Okay, let's move on to Turkey now, where it looks like there's some serious political unrest going on.
Yeah, we've been seeing posts on X talking about the turmoil that's been sparked by the arrest of Istanbul's mayor.
Really? That's a pretty bold move. What led to that?
The details are still a little murky, but it seems like there have been protests happening throughout the night and continuing into today.
So it's an ongoing situation.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And it's definitely attracting a lot of international attention.
Well, yeah, I mean, political instability in a country like Turkey, which holds such a strategic position, it's bound to raise eyebrows globally. And arresting a figure like the mayor of Istanbul, especially if people see it as politically motivated, it can really ignite public anger and make people question the state of democracy in the country.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people will be watching closely to see how this unfolds and what it means for Turkey, both internally and in terms of its relationships with other countries.
Agreed. Now, let's switch gears a bit and zoom in on some more local news.
Right, let's do that. Z News in India reported yesterday afternoon that the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, he's visiting Mirzapur today.
Interesting. What's the occasion?
Looks like he's there for a governance program, and he's also planning to visit the Vindhyachal temple.
So a mix of official business and cultural engagement.
Exactly. Sounds like a pretty big deal for the folks in Mirzapur and Uttar Pradesh in general.
It is interesting, isn't it? You know, we spend so much time focusing on these huge global events, but then there's this whole other layer of things happening at the regional and local level that are just as important to people's everyday lives.
It's a good reminder that the world keeps spinning even amidst all the international drama.
And oftentimes, understanding what's happening on the ground in different places can give you a much deeper understanding of the bigger picture.
Totally agree. Okay, let's jump back into some economic news. This time it's out of Nigeria. News Scrolling posted last night that Nigeria Customs has announced a 2-year exemption on tariffs for pharmaceutical raw materials.
Really? That's interesting. So what does that mean exactly?
It means that for the next 2 years, companies won't have to pay those extra import taxes on the materials they need to make medicines. And this exemption went into effect today.
That's a pretty significant move. I wonder what prompted it.
They also mentioned in the post that the public holidays for Idle Fitch are coming up next week. So maybe it's a way to ensure a stable supply of affordable medications during that time.
Makes sense. It's a time when families get together, and there's often more travel and social interaction, so ensuring access to healthcare is especially important.
Exactly. And, focusing on pharmaceutical raw materials specifically, that could have a ripple effect on the entire healthcare sector in Nigeria. Could lead to lower production costs, making medicines more affordable for everyone.
Yeah, it could be a real game changer in terms of improving access to healthcare.
Let's stay in the region for a moment and head over to Odisha in India. Odisha TV reported early yesterday that the Puri-Rourkela Vande Bharat Express, which is a pretty major rail line there, will start running daily, except Tuesdays, beginning in June of next year.
Oh, that's good news for commuters on that route.
Definitely. It's all about improving connectivity and travel options. The announcement was made today so people have plenty of time to plan their trips.
That's great. I mean, investing in infrastructure like that, especially modern, efficient transportation systems, it can have a huge impact on regional development. Faster, more comfortable journeys, that's good for individuals and businesses alike.
Absolutely. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to touch on a few other quick-hitting news items just to give you a more complete picture.
Sounds good.
So, to circle back to President Trump's tariff on foreign vehicles, it's worth emphasizing that the stated goals there are really about trying to revitalize American manufacturing and address those perceived trade imbalances we were talking about.
Right, so it's about boosting domestic production and trying to level the playing field in international trade.
That's the idea, anyway. Now, shifting to a different kind of tension, there are reports coming out of Gaza about protests against Hamas. Hundreds of people have reportedly taken to the streets.
Protests against Hamas. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the reasons behind them seem to be multifaceted. There's frustration with the humanitarian situation, obviously, the ongoing conflict, and it also seems like some people are calling for a change in leadership.
That's significant. I mean, we often hear about the conflict between Israel and Hamas, but these protests show that there's a lot going on within Gaza itself, with people grappling with the realities of the situation and demanding change.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that these conflicts are never simple, and there are always layers of complexity to consider.
Exactly.
Now, on a more somber note, we also saw some really concerning news out of South Korea. Apparently, there have been some devastating wildfires there, and tragically, at least 24 people have lost their lives.
Oh, that's awful.
It is. Thousands of people have been evacuated, and the government has declared a state of emergency in the affected areas. It just highlights how vulnerable we can be to these kinds of natural disasters, even with all our technological advancements.
It does. And climate change is only making these events more frequent and more severe. It's a stark reminder that we need to take these threats seriously and work together to mitigate the risks.
Couldn't agree more. Now let's end on a slightly more positive note. There are some encouraging reports coming out of India about a significant increase in Social Security coverage.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, apparently it's more than doubled from 2021 to 2024, going from about 24% to almost 49% of the population now covered.
Wow, that's a huge jump. What do you think drove that change?
Hard to say for sure, but it could be a combination of factors. Government policies, economic growth, maybe even increased awareness of the importance of Social Security.
Whatever the reasons, it's a positive development for sure. Expanding Social Security coverage can make a huge difference in people's lives, providing that safety net, reducing poverty, and contributing to overall economic stability.
Absolutely. Finally, we're seeing reports about some raids conducted by the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, on the residences of the former Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh, Bhupesh Badal.
That sounds serious.
It is. It's all tied to an ongoing investigation, and it's definitely stirred up some political tensions in the state.
Investigations involving high-ranking officials are always sensitive, and they can have a ripple effect throughout the political landscape. I imagine this will be a closely watched story in the coming days.
No doubt about it.
Uh-huh.
So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of some pretty major global events that have happened in the past 24 hours. I don't know about you, but it really strikes me just how interconnected everything is.
It really does. I mean, you've got these potential shifts in major conflicts, big changes in trade policy, political turmoil in one place, devastating natural disasters in another, and then these more local developments happening at the same time. It's all part of the same tapestry, constantly weaving and shifting.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final thought for you, dear listener. With all these events swirling around, from the possibility of a Black Sea truce to those ongoing trade disputes, political arrests, environmental crises, and everything in between, what do you think? What single trend or event do you feel will have the most lasting impact in the weeks and months to come? It's something to ponder as you navigate your own day. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought and a clearer lens through which to view our ever-changing world.
Absolutely. The world is complex and constantly in motion, and staying informed is the best way to make sense of it all.
Couldn't have said it better myself.